Hi everyone, how are you doing today? Well, it's been a while since my last video, but I thought what I would do, short of creating some dedicated videos to each of these books, was to go through my reading of this past summer in the Northern Hemisphere, and let you know what I thought of them. I had some videos planned for a few of these books, and I may still do them, but before I forget, before my schedule gets insanely busy any further, I thought, why don't I go ahead and just tell you what I thought of these? This will just be a quick hits and misses of summer 2021. A lot of these are ebooks, so sorry I don't have nice hard copies for them, but I want to talk about them anyway. First one being The Call of Cthulhu by H.P. Lovecraft. The Call of Cthulhu is probably Lovecraft's most famous work, or at least the work that features his most famous character. This was my first time reading Lovecraft, and I obviously came into it with huge expectations because he's, this giant of the horror genre, and, from an era that I'm particularly fond of, which is I think it's the late 1800s, early 1900s. Hold on, I have Goodreads up here, let me just double check that. 1890 to 1937, so yes, that sweet spot of literature I'm really fond of. And honestly, I was disappointed by The Call of Cthulhu. It's a short story. It's told in a series of notes that the narrator has discovered or compiled from other people. So it's similar to stories by Arthur Conan Doyle and H.G. Wells. But unlike Wells and Doyle, I felt like Lovecraft was doing a whole lot of telling in this short story and not enough showing for me. I really like how Doyle, for example, paints atmosphere and his horror stories through his characters and tries to mirror what's going on in those characters. And I think Wells, while he doesn't do that quite as much, he certainly does a good job of showing you what's happening instead of merely recounting some things. I wouldn't say this was a bad story. I will be reading more Lovecraft for sure because I just love this late Victorian, early Edwardian horror, but I wouldn't say I really enjoyed it that much, and I don't know. We'll see if I like any of his other stories as I get into his work further. Moving on to a book that was a hit for me. It was Beneath the Wheel by Hermann Hesse, and I've done a whole video on this novel. I described it as a dark academia novel, which is loosely describing a book that kind of features around someone's college experiences and sort of like the highlights and the lowlights of being immersed in your studies to an extreme degree, as the character of Beneath the Wheel is, or is supposed to be. I won't recap my entire review. You can go check it out. I'll link to it in the description and in the corner of this video. But suffice it to say, I really enjoyed Beneath the Wheel. It was my first Hesse, and I feel like it's, for lack of a better word, a very charming book. I think it was his first novel, and it just really swept me up in his descriptions of Germany and his descriptions of the protagonist, who is, trying to find a balance in his life between what people want him to do and how he wants to spend his life, and how his friendship with another student really changes his life in both positive and negative ways. So that's a little recap of Beneath the Wheel, but yes, if you want to hear more about it, check out my other review. The next book I read after that was another by the same author called Steppenwolf. And Steppenwolf, I believe, is one of his most famous works. It was very popular in the 1960s, I think. And honestly, coming after Beneath the Wheel, I was really disappointed by Steppenwolf. I enjoyed the first half. It's this sort of philosophical rambling by this guy who is obviously having an existential crisis it reminded me a lot of Notes from Underground by Dostoevsky. And then the second half of the book, it just goes full into like the life and times of the Weimar Republic and just, Germany between the wars. And, if you know anything about that, it was a very, how should we put it? Just think roaring 20s, but sort of to the extreme. And, yeah, I didn't really enjoy the second half of the book. It just got really weird, and I didn't feel like the character had a very natural arc. I feel like he got from point A to point B in his life in just this really random way. It just didn't speak to me. So that's Steppenwolf, a bit of a disappointment. Okay, so here's another book I've talked about on various live streams. This is my commonplace book. But no, this is The Gate by Natsume Soseki. I really loved The Gate, and I think I've mentioned it several times, so I won't spend too much time on it now. This is a novel about Japan coming out of the old traditional life and entering into the new life, featuring a very ordinary couple, Sosuke and Oyone, and sort of their day-to-day worries and troubles as far as money and their relationship and Sosuke's brother. This is a very slow book. There's not really a lot that happens, but it was really my cup of tea. And I think the ending was spectacular, even though you may be highly disappointed by the ending, as I was at first. I don't know. This is a book that I think will really stick with me, just in the way the story is told. And again, that ending was pretty memorable. I'm not going to give it away, but yeah, I think The Gate is well worth a try. But keep in mind, it is very slow. It's very, I don't know, it's just about these little scenes from this couple's life. So if that interests you, I think you'd like it. If you're looking for something more fast-paced, probably not for you. Okay, so I would consider The Gate a hit for sure. Another hit that I read after that was Sachiko by Shusaku Endo. This has been one of my favorite books of the summer and of the entire year. Frankly, it just checked a lot of boxes for me personally, and I feel like it's a book that maybe not everyone watching this video is going to like. It does center upon Christianity in Japan during World War II, which I think is a really interesting and unique topic. I haven't read about it in other books. I wasn't even aware that this book existed until recently. It was translated, I think it was translated last year for the first time into English. And so this book follows a character, or a couple of characters, who grew up in Nagasaki and how they were treated as Catholic Christians during the interwar era. And then, like, all the different moral dilemmas that they faced as the war really got into full swing, and they were, trying to figure out what to do about being conscripted and dealing with prejudice from other Japanese due to their Western faith, or what was considered to be their Western faith. And then there's also the subplot which follows a real-life figure, Maximilian Kolbe, who was a Catholic priest that ministered in Nagasaki, but also was interned at Auschwitz. So that was really interesting as well. I mean, I just thought this book was extraordinary. I wasn't fond of the writing, I'll be honest. I think that this is not Endo's best writing. It's kind of long, repetitive, and just frankly too long and repetitive, and in some places maybe too simplistic. But frankly, I did love this book. I think the subject matter and the characters really made up for some of the flaws in the writing. And I don't have a copy of it yet, but I'm planning to get one. Another Endo book that I read, really, it's just a play. It's called The Golden Country, and I would describe this as a retelling of his novel Silence. I really liked it a lot. I thought the play was in some ways even better than the novel. I liked the ending a lot better. I will link to a book review that I wrote on my blog about it in case you're interested in learning more. So another book I read this summer, this was for a Reading the World read-along, 3 Summers, appropriately titled, by Margarita Libaraki, a Greek author. I think this is a mid-century novel, and I think I've talked about it on the live stream before. This book was difficult to rate, honestly. I didn't dislike it completely. I think it had beautiful writing. I think she was doing some interesting things with how she was developing the characters. It follows 3 sisters, and they've all got different personalities and goals and dreams. And so this follows their coming of age stories and their family dynamic. Their parents are separate or divorced, actually, and just, I don't know, there's a lot of different threads in this book. She really spends a lot of time building up some of these threads, and then I felt like the ending was just like she sort of unraveled everything at the end. That was just my impression. I don't know that I would recommend this book. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't really my cup of tea, I guess. But if you're looking to read a Greek novel, I don't think this is a bad choice. And if you like family dramas, then this may particularly appeal to you. The next book I read was Chess Story by Stefan Zweig. And I've talked about this on a previous live stream, but Chess Story was another highlight of the summer and indeed of the year. It was funny, it was tragic, and it was tantalizing. Those are the 3 words that came to mind after I finished it. And if you are not into chess, it will make you want to get into chess. But essentially, it's about this ship that's headed for, I believe, Argentina. And there's a famous chess player on board, and he's kind of standoffish, kind of arrogant, and all these other people want to kind of draw him out, want to play a game of chess against him. So they're looking for people to go up against this chess master, and they randomly come across this guy who, as it turns out, is quite talented and a formidable opponent to the chess master. And then the story becomes a big flashback in which this anonymous or semi-anonymous passenger is relating how they got into chess and what it really means to their life and in their psyche. But basically, he was using chess as a way to withstand interrogation when he was imprisoned by the Nazis. So I'm not going to give away a lot more because it is very short, and to say anything more would just be like too spoilery, but I highly recommend Chess Story. It's not as depressing as I thought it would be. It's just very thought-provoking, and I will certainly be reading it again in the future. Let's see. So after that, I read Life Without Principle by Henry David Thoreau. I read that on the YouTube channel. Really good essay. And then we read Palace of the Peacock by Wilson Harris. So this is another book I want to do a full video on, along with Heart of Darkness, which there are some parallels between the two. What to say about Palace of the Peacock? I will say that it was an interesting read in that I really wasn't into it until like the last third or the last quarter of the book. And then I thought the ending was really, really good, and it kind of changed my entire view on this book. But I think the best way to describe this is it's very poetic. If you're looking to read this just like any other novel, you're going to be disappointed. There's not going to be like a solid plot for you to chew on. It's more of an exploration, more of a painting, I would say, kind of like Virginia Woolf's The Waves. loosely speaking. It follows this group of men as they travel down the river looking for the palace of the peacock. Actually, they're not looking for that. That's the thing. But that palace features in the ending of the book. Yeah, so there's a lot of commentary in this on like colonialism, a lot of commentary on identity and race, and the timeline is very fluid in this book. So, something will happen and something else will happen later on that doesn't make sense, but that's because he's not following a strict timeline, a strict linear timeline. Well, as I mentioned before, I found it hard to get into this book until he started going into some religious symbolism, and then the ending I thought was really good. So I'm not sure if this was a hit or a miss for me. It's kind of right in the middle. But yeah, I would say give it a try, go into it with an open mind, and if you're like me and you really enjoy some symbolism and sort of a highly symbolic ending, then this might be interesting to you. All right, so 2 more books to go. The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Now, I keep debating whether to do a full video on this, so I'm just going to mention this in passing, and if you want to hear more, please let me know in the comments, and if you don't, please also let me know. I did not finish this book. I gave up at 83%. It's quite a long book, so I really tried to give it my best go, and I was reading it as a read-along, but so if there's a book that ticks all the boxes for me, this is the book that like unticks all the boxes. I enjoyed the beginning, okay? The beginning's nice. It's about this Californian guy who goes to this college in Vermont, and he's just taken by the scenery, the atmosphere, the college itself, which is full of interesting people. His professor is an eccentric. Really cool beginning. Really enjoyed the beginning. So the book really fell apart for me after that. I think, my personal bias in writing is strongly written characters. They don't have to be great characters. They don't have to be moral characters per se, but I just want characters that I can believe they exist. I can believe that they do the things they do, and they don't. Some level of unpredictability is fine, but I just need to believe in the characters to some degree. And this book, I felt like the characters were caricatures at best and just sort of cardboard cutouts at worst. And I know that's going to be like, a lot of people love this book, so I don't want to like rant on it too much. But that was a big problem for me. Donna Tartt tends to just drop little information bombs along the way in her story, and that also bothered me because I like a more organic building of characters and building of the story. I'm not fond of believing certain things about a character and then like the next page she'll drop some information bombs about them kind of out of the blue, and it's like, okay, so now I've got to readjust myself here to this character. And my favorite character, so this is not a spoiler. The book is a murder mystery told from the perspective of the murderers, and she tells you who gets killed at the beginning of the story. And his name is Bunny, and he's basically Piggy from Lord of the Flies. This book is pretty derivative, by the way, of Lord of the Flies and also the Dead Poets Society. But anyway, my favorite character was Bunny, so as soon as he was out of the picture, I was very frustrated with the rest of the story. And I think what really led me to not finish it anymore is I just felt like things were getting too exaggerated and over the top, and just plain uncomfortable. Like, the characters are so unpleasant, and they become increasingly unpleasant. And I just reached my limit at 83%. I'm like, okay, I'm done with this. I really don't care what happens to them anymore. I really don't feel like the plot's moving fast enough or developing in any ways that I am interested in seeing the ending of. So I just went on Wikipedia and read the ending, and I'm glad I didn't finish it because that would have made me very upset. Okay, I just realized that my camera ran out of space and I didn't check that before filming. But anyway, these are mostly ebooks, so bear with me. Yeah, The Secret History was a huge miss for me. It was one of the worst books I have ever read, and that's all I can say for now. And then the last book that I read, it was another Reading the World book. It was Seeing Red by Lina Meruane. This book was also terrible, if I'm being honest. It's about this woman who is going through some eyesight problems and nearly goes blind. But it's not... She's just a very negative person, and I don't just mean about the things that's happening to her eyesight, but like her entire perspective is very negative. And there's also some really weird and gross scenes in this book, both of the like the surgeries and stuff, but also just her relationship with her boyfriend, who is the only person in the entire book she seems to have any affinity for. But things get pretty weird between them. I'm not going to go into it in detail. I just found this book completely disgusting. And I wouldn't say it doesn't have any positive points. I mean, I think she writes pretty well. Like, it's told in a series of vignettes. And I liked some of the metaphors she was using. I liked some of her writing style. But apart from that, this book was so unpleasant on multiple levels. And I hated the ending so much. So Seeing Red was a big miss, and we'll be reading another book for Chile instead. So I did finish it, but it just was so disappointing. So yeah, that's my reading for summer leading into early autumn. I hope this was helpful or interesting in some way. Right now I am reading, I'm still reading Heart of Darkness for like the 4th or 5th time. Going to try to do a video on that. And the commentary / criticism by Achebe, which I have read as well, and Palace of the Peacock. Those 3 works really have some overlap, and I think that would be a nice comparison to do. I'm also reading a book from Slovenia called Panorama, and I'm sure I will have things to say about that as well. And then I'm also going to be reading Crime and Punishment. I should have started it last week, but I just had too much going on. So plan is to start it this week and either I might do like, I guess I could do like maybe weekly check-ins on that. That might be an interesting video series. Especially with Dostoevsky, I think it's helpful to kind of collect your thoughts as you go along because he has a lot to say in most of his writing. So thanks for watching. I hope you're having a great weekend, start to your week, and I will see you next time.